All right, moving on to Augment Wyrm here. Cool picture. Worms are different from dragons, and worms are a race. You can encounter a worm. And just like dragon and all the other ones, technically, there is when you're becoming an augment worm, you're moving closer towards the racial worm. Uh, so worm is 50 wizardry and 50 avatar, so both the spell casting. So we just covered Reaver, which was both the fighting pools. This is both the magic pools. So these guys are extra magicy, and I would say between all of the augments, I've the most is Paladin and Wyrm. A lot of people want to play Knights. I would say Wyrm is probably the most common augment. I would 100% say that. Worms are really really good. Uh, you're giving up a lot when you're not playing a worm. And worms are sweet, man. They're sick. The worm, so well, they have scales just like dragons have scales, but their worm scales are different from dragon scales. Where dragon scales are pointy, worm scales are kind of weavy. They're kind of wavy scales as opposed to sharp pointed triangular scales. And just like dragon, there is a bunch of colors, and your color of your worm determines is based around your uh personality, right? Like the decisions that you make. And just like dragon and paladin to an extent, plot interacts with you and judges the decisions that you make, and it's important to what color you turn out to be. Okay, so that was the makeup requirements. You have a full face. Like when you're playing Worm, your whole face is covered for the most part with ooh, excuse me, is covered with these scale things. It's very much you are dedicating yourself to being a worm in terms of facial makeup. All right, moving past the makeup, we're gonna go straight into the skills. This is the only one that has some unique. So like 3 build for 1.5 body, but then 10 build for 5 body. Yeah, so they have a. This is the only augment that doesn't have a net neutral or a net positive ratio with body to build. Okay, because specifically spellcasters, that's a lot of how this game is balanced in terms of body. Is that typically in most systems, spellcasters are easier to kill because they have lower health. How does Shiftedlands do that? Well, the spell skills give you less body ratios than the fighting skills, which give you better body ratios. Um, so in this case, with base worm, at least with base worm, I don't know about elder worm. Uh, your ratios are the only one so far that's been negative because you're the dedicated I'm casting spells augment. All right, we're going to get into the first skill, transfer mana. Worms may transfer one type of magic pool from themselves to another. The worm may transfer their spirit or sorcery to a willing mobile or immobile target by touch. Each pull transferred this way is a separate use of this ability. To use this skill, the worm must simply touch the target and say, Worm transfer 15 sorcery. It is not possible for the target being to gain more mana than they have naturally. If a worm transfers more mana than the target may possess, the excess is simply lost. The worm is not aware of the mana lost this way. The skill has no per use cost and may only transfer spirit or sorcery. Okay, so if you understand Channeler, and where Channeler has channel magic, where they get to accept magic from other people, which they can accept from anybody. The prerequisite is that the Channeler is there. It doesn't have to be. You don't have to be a worm to get magic. They can so channelers can accept magic from anybody. Okay. Worms, this skill lets you give magic to anybody. From themselves to another. So you can hand out your spirit and sorcery to other people. The skill and there's at no extra cost. There's not like any ratio. You're not paying anything. You just get to hand out magic. You just get to hand out magic pool, which is neat. It's helpful. There's times it's important for ritual casting too because somebody might be like, well, this ritual takes this much like this much spirit and sorcery, and I don't have that much. okay, well, I don't want to sit in this circle with you for like 3 hours to cast this ritual, so here, take my magic, right? Like, that's essentially what this kind of amounts to. Uh, but yeah, there's a bunch of uses for this essentially, and it's neat, and it makes sense that a magic-y guy can transfer magic to other people. Makes sense. Uh, Wyrm, resist magic spell, 3 per 3. Uh, Upon learning this spell, the Wyrm may resist any spirit or sorcery spell that hits them by spending 3 and 3 upper. It's good. It's good in a pinch. Because most of the time, if you're a Wyrm, you're gonna be casting shield magic on you, which is gonna stop a spell. But this is neat because if you get hit with like multiple spells in a row, you can resist them. The ratio is good. 3 and 3 is okay, especially for the other stuff. Um, where Dragon was paying 3 and 3 to physical resist, and Ascetic is paying 3 and 3 to phase. I think it was 3 and 3 to phase. It might be like 5 and 5. It'd be nuts if it was 3 and 3 to phase. But yeah, they get to do it for spells. Makes sense. I think Reaver used to have something like this where they got to also physical resist for 3 and 3, um, which was neat. But I think that might have been too strong. Because a lot of these augments have been changed up. Specifically, Reaver and Wyrm have been changed over the course of my 7 years of playing. I think I've seen multiple changes done to all these augments because augments are such a tough thing to balance in terms of these are really good skills, right? Like it's tough to balance these things. So there's 2 updates a year, and almost I would say almost every update in Augment typically gets modified in some little way here, or they add a clarification to a rule or some etc. Um, but yeah. Anyway, innate force sphere. Based off of your color of your worm color, right? Like your scales, you get to cast a spear innately. Casting a spell in this manner requires no in-game incant and no spellbook. All other rules for casting a spell apply. So if you're a specific colored worm, you get to. So like, let's just say I'm gonna say red. I know red can be interpreted a bunch of different ways, but let's just assume an association with red and fire. That might not even be the case. But let's assume you're a red worm, and that means you can do fire, right? So you can cast elemental fire spells innately. So you can without a spellbook. So you can throw fireballs by saying innate fireball spell, innate grant or some innate summon fireball spell, and you can just do that without. You still spend pool to do it, but you get to do it even when you don't have a spellbook, and even when you can't, even when you're muted. Keep that in mind. It's innately it's being done innately. You're not saying an incantation. This is representative of this thing just coming out of you. So even if you're under the effect of a mute, which is effective, which is pretty good against casters, you can still innately cast the spear, which is relevant. Um, Please see the specific spell. Additionally, the Worm gains doubled the benefit from the Grant Armor spell. I don't know why this is just tagged on here. Uh, but yeah, you also get doubled from the Grant Armor spell, which is 40 armors, and so you get 80 armor, which is cool. It makes sense. You don't have a lot of armor as a worm, so I mean, typically you're playing a spellcaster, so you're not carrying and wearing armor on yourself. So getting double from Grant battle armor is good. The sphere of magic is determined by plot, and it's based on your scale colors. All right. And that was specifically force, but there's an individual one for each of the different spheres, essentially, and each of the different elements. Innate sphere description. This goes list. Oh, okay. So this is an additional. So you pick up. Okay. I should have read this before I went through the video. I'm kind of regretting that now because all the other augments I had to like remind myself what they did. Like I went through it and then I recorded the video, but with Wyrm I didn't do that because I'm just trying to crush this out before midnight because it's 11. So I guess there's additional benefits. Oh, that was specifically force. Okay, yeah. So this is just the one you want to click on when you're okay. Okay. Sorry about that. So this is the actual spell, and then based off your sphere, you get a given thing. So force gains the double benefit of the create battle armor spell. But if we went to nature, we would see that we regenerate 1 body per minute. So where's nature? Nature. In additionally, the worm generates 1 body per minute. Yeah, so like there's a different unique. Let's look at all of them real quick. So there's a different unique effect. Lightning gets resist lightnings. Earth gets elemental pool lightning. Ooh, that's neat. You get to throw elemental. So elemental pool works like normal pool, but it's a 1-to-1 ratio, and you get to throw it. So like if you have 50 lightning pool, you can throw 50 lightning once, right? Or you could do like 10 lightning, 10 lightning, 10 lightning 5 times. And that's how that works. Combine equal to the combined sorcery and spirit pulls. That's neat. So that's cool for elements. Gaze is interesting. It gets around certain defenses for charm. Neutral. Dispel magic touch on themselves. The worm may pick and choose which effects are dispelled, which are not. That's sick. Chaos. 3 times per logistics, ritual strike via any weapon or body weapon. One of the following rituals from the worm's memorized combat rituals: Wrath, Obliterate, Bleeding Heart. Elements. Worm may use Grant Elemental Shield as a smart defense. Mana. Worm pays only half cost for all worm touches. We're gonna get into like what some of these things are referencing. Worm nature is super sweet. Force is cool. Force is sweet. Uh, so that's the innate sphere skill. So you get transfer mana, resist magic spell, an innate sphere with an effect dependent upon what sphere it is. You get claws. You get base 2 short claws, and we talked about stacking claws with a couple of the other ones. You get claws because you become more like a worm, where dragons got long claws, I believe. Uh, and then worm combat rituals. Yeah. This is an important one to know. Upon gaining access to the combat rituals ability, the worm may memorize a ritual and cast it later as needed, as if it were an ordinary spell. The worm may only memorize rituals with total casting cost 10 or less, and may only hold. So this prevents you from memorizing certain rituals that cost more than 10, which I assume has to do with the crafting and the cost of casting a ritual in a circle. So essentially, uh, what this means is that Wrath, I think, is dirt cheap. I'm pretty sure Wraths are like 1 or 2, um, or they might just be 10. I don't know, because this isn't in my realm. I'm a Nulfidian. I do not. I'm literally the complete opposite of this. Worms run away from me, but I have no idea what the actual costs of these are, and they're also not in the rule book, so I couldn't tell you even if I knew them. But essentially, what you do is you get your spell components together, and you cast Ritual Wrath a bunch of times in a circle to like prepare. So you prepare these combat spells, these combat rituals ahead of time, and then when you cast them, you can memorize them in your head. You can put them into your noggin as if you were absorbing a spell, like from Eldritch Trickster or how channelers absorb spells and rituals. They can memorize them, they can absorb them into their head, and then they can throw the rituals later. And specifically, the most relevant one is Wrath. They can throw Ritual Wrath, which is very similar to Morphle Flay. If it rhymes with Morphle Flay as a effect. The worm may only memorize rituals with the casting, and may only hold a number of rituals equal to the combined sorcery and spirit in their memory. So if you have 50 and 50 of the lowers, which is the bare minimum, you can hold 100 total, 100 rituals in your head, which is more than enough. You don't want 100 rafts. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. To use this ability, the worm must cast the ritual as normal. Please see Ritual Magic section of the rules. The worm becomes both the caster and the target when memorizing ritual. Upon completion, the ritual is stored in the wizard mind, rather than having any immediate effect. Any wild surges or backfires that occur during the process occur at that moment, so there's still the chance to backfire or surge, and those things happen before they go into your noggin. Once memorized, the ritual acts normally when packet delivered, free of wild surges or backfires. It may be thrown or touch cast. It is only necessary to purchase this skill once. Wow, that was a mouthful, right? Okay. So what this means is that you get to have ritual wraths. This is like the bare minimum here. You get to have ritual wraths, and you get to throw ritual wraths, and essentially you have to cast the ritual wraths in a circle ahead of time, store them in your noggin, and you get to throw the amount that you casted in that circle and store it in your noggin. You get to throw them at whatever. And I'm pretty sure they transfer between games. So if you've stocked up on 50 rafts, then you have 50 rafts until you start using all your 50 rafts, right? Like, um, that's like something you write down on your character sheet and you bring it with you to the next game. Combines just how Reavers got to combine their lower pools of the fighting pools. This gets to combine the lower pools of the magic. It's literally the exact same. This skill will allow any focus pools to be used to cast spells of either school. It is only necessary. That's pretty sweet. Yeah. If you saw Reaver and I told you about how that worked, it works exactly the same here, but just with spirit and sorcery. And then detect magic touch. It has wizardry. So all the wizardry things got detect magic touch, which is detect, identify, and dispel. Again, dispel cannot be thrown, so it's only for willing targets or immobile targets. So yeah. All right. That was base Wyrm. So base Wyrm, you're getting combat rituals, a cool sphere, transferring mana, you're resisting spells, and you're getting to combine your lower pools. Okay. Pretty neat. Um, all of these skills are really good. All of these skills are sick. Uh, it might seem a little underwhelming, but combat rituals is nuts. Okay, you just need to understand that this is the reason why you play Wyrm, is because you get combat rituals. Like just throwing ritual rafts like candy is insane, and you get to just do that as a Wyrm. It's nuts. Okay, going into Elder Wyrm, which is what a lot of Wyrms typically do, is they become Elder Wyrms. A lot of people go Wyrm, Elder Wyrm, and they never even think about augmenting. Okay. All right. Wyrm resistance. Wyrm may resist ritual. The Elder Wyrm may resist a ritual effect for 5 Avatar and 5 Wizardry, or may Wyrm resist X, where X is the name of the ritual, the cost for which is 1 Avatar, 1 Wizardry, and 1 instance of the named ritual from the Wyrm's own memory. So if you have Ritual Wrath in your head, and somebody throws a Ritual Wrath at you, you can spend, instead of 5 and 5 to defend against it, you can spend 1/1 and remove a Ritual Wrath from your head to defend. Cool, neat. Uh, this right here, just you may resist a ritual effect for 5 and 5, is sweet. It's sick, and it doesn't care what ritual it is. It's just a ritual. That's super good, boys. Super good. 5 and 5 for a ritual resist. Sign me the F up, homie. This is amazing. Alrighty. Enhanced combat rituals. Wyrm can store as many rituals in their head as they like of any power. The Wyrm is no longer restricted from memorizing rituals based on casting cost and may hold as many rituals in their memory as they wish. Okay, so where combat rituals said you may only memorize rituals with 10 or less. Okay, that essentially, and it's called combat rituals, but you could delete combat and you can just say Wyrm mental rituals, and it would make a lot more sense that way to me, personally. Um, you get to, for 10 or less, you get to memorize rituals that cost 10 or less here. And then you're limited in the number of rituals you can hold, which is typically going to be 100 minimum. Okay? Like it literally has to be 100 minimum. Enhanced combat ritual. So a Elder Wyrm or a regular Wyrm will have their character sheet and they will write down every like 50, 10 times wraths. I have 10 wraths, right? And they'll like write that shit down on their character sheet. Elder Wyrm no longer has to worry about the ritual being 10 or less, so they can keep. I'm pretty sure, and I'm assuming here, that a lot of the very unique rituals that you can throw at people, or utility rituals that are good to have in your head for when certain things come up, cost more than 10 is what I would assume. So like it's gatekeeping the really good rituals from being in your head 24/7 by saying you have to be an elder worm to get these, which is cool. And it's super, and it's probably important to do that. Uh Very simple. It's one sentence. It's an amazing one sentence to have, honestly. This also, hidden text here. Worms are the richest people in the game, okay? Uh I can't get into why, but the economy lives and dies off of worms in game, okay? Worms constantly are buying stuff, worms are constantly selling stuff, and they're selling like magical stuff because they have certain rituals that provide utility that they can keep in their head, and it's expensive to do a lot of those rituals. Like they don't like there's costs associated with casting rituals, so they charge you for the cost of that ritual cast, and then they charge whatever upkeep it is, or like they upcharge you based off of how that worm feels that day, or and there's very much an economy for some certain rituals and certain utility rituals that you want casted on yourself or on an item per se. Uh, anyway, yeah, so that's that. Worm Mist Walk. Just like we talked about Reaver and how this is a ton of roleplay, this is also a ton of roleplay. It's the same skill that everybody else has for Mistwalk. There's no different Mistwalking skills. It's sick. Although worms, compared to Reavers, definitely don't want to be in the mist. It's interesting that they can, and there's lore reasons why they can go into the mist. That's for you to figure out, and it's cool. Yeah, they get a Mistwalk. Lots of roleplay. We've talked about Mistwalk a ton. If you want to see more about it, go look at Reaver or Nullifidian Race. Worm Elder, destroy magic touch. So where they had identify, where is it? They had detect magic touch. They now have destroy magic touch. Or DMT for short, which is can be triggering to some people. I've been in a bad head state and somebody said, "Oh, just do DMT or some shit like that," and it like messed with my head for a hot minute there. Um, but yeah, like destroy magic touch or DMT for short. Upon acquiring the skill, they may touch an object and say Worm Destroy Magic. Unlike Ritual Disenchant, this will work on ritually locked items. Basically, this is the I'm destroying this thing button, and nobody else has access to this kind of level of destruction to that Elder Worms get. Okay, there's lots of times where, like, hey, for plot reasons, we need to blow this thing up, and like Worm Destroy Magic Touch is like the answer. It is like the only answer. Like you better have a worm with this skill who's ready to use it. um and there's like a whole paragraph to this, but really what it means is that you can destroy items at will by paying a cost, and it's actually nuts. And you also get to interact with artifacts. This is some of the few times that the word artifact gets mentioned in the rulebook here. But Worm Destroy Artifact for 50 and 50. So if you want to know how insane artifacts are, like it takes 50 and 50 to destroy them. In order to use a skill, Worm must take possession of the object. Say Worm destroy the artifact to see if it's focus or a shatter both through them. You get to blow up focuses, which is nuts. So if you get your focus blown up, dude, you don't have access to your uppers until you get another focus, and getting another focus is not easy. So if you have a bad guy and you somehow get the item that they have as their focus, you can blow it up, and then they don't have access to uppers. And that's fucking brutal. That is absolutely brutal. So that's why, like, when you're talking about 50-50, it's nuts, man. It's actually crazy. Um, yeah. This goes a lot longer than just like I'm blowing up a thing. It's very important. Like there's nothing else on this level of I am blowing up this thing, and there's nothing you can do about stopping it. Like this is the thing that does that. Okay. Doesn't work on people, I'm pretty sure. There's the whole paragraph in between here that I didn't read, and I assume that it's a bunch of stuff about like this is the specifics of it, blah 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 blah. Like I don't care about magic, but if you're going to be an Elder Worm, you probably want to read this. Okay. Enhanced resist spell. When struck with this spell, the worm may, as a smart defense, resist the spell for 3 sorcery and 3 spirit, or may choose to reflect the spell. So this immediately drops the so your resist spell was 3 uppers, was 3 avatar and 3 wizardry. You get to do it for lowers, baby. You get to do it for 3 and 3. Okay, that's sick. That could be a skill by itself. Or you can pay the uppers to reflect the spell, and reflect is in the rulebook, and it's a spell that you can have, and it basically lets you, like, it hits you, and then you go reflect spell name, and you throw it right back at them. It's super good. I don't think it has to be the same exact target that hit you with it, so you can like reflect it and hit it at a different bad guy. But it's neat. You get to do it, and you get to do it for dirt cheap. Honestly, this is dirt cheap for what it is. This by itself is an A tier ability. This is a neat upside that you may also do occasionally if they throw like a really good spell at you or something. We're gonna talk about Staff of the Magi last. Mana types at the same time. Enhanced transfer mana. The worm may pay 1 wizard and 1 avatar each time it transfers mana to another being. However, the elder worm may transfer multiple times the mana at the same time as one use. To use the skill, this worm may be blah blah blah. 15 sorcery, 10 ever. An example. Okay, it is not possible for a target to gain more mana than him. Blah, 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 blah. Note, this is a mistype. Note that this ability is not limited to touch and may choose to throw a packet. So, over here where you could share your magic and there was no associated cost with it, you essentially may now share uppers by paying uppers. By paying 1 and 1, you can share uppers. And then you may also do it at range. So if you're across a battlefield and somebody needs mana, you can throw them your mana. And you can also do it with uppers. So it's important because thinking back at it, actually, a ton of rituals need uppers. And this skill, going back to the skill, and this is, I'm not a spellcaster, so I didn't catch this the first time. A ton of the uppers are used in rituals, and specifically uppers. Like, you can't do it with lowers. So this only lets you transfer lowers. So now here you're like actually really helping out other people by giving them uppers to cast rituals with, essentially, or they're like paying you for the upper to cast the ritual with, which is super important. Very neat. Very good skill, very good upgrade. You pay 1 and 1 to transfer uppers every day of the week, dude. If you're transferring uppers, there's a good reason for it. All right, and then Staff of the Magi. We're just gonna click. It's 10 and 10 cost. We're just gonna click on it. Okay. So, where some of the other augments got summonable weapons, right? Like Reaver got a weapon of choice, Paladin got a Paladin weapon, Eldritch Trickster got a base 2 spell strikey thing. Worms get Staff of the Magi. Okay? So, just like how your regular foci focus for your pools work for lowers, okay? And you do that at a 5-to-1 ratio. So you spend 5 sorcery to store 1 point of sorcery, right? This is a focus, a 1-to-1 focus ratio, which is bonkers for all 4 of your magics types. This is absolutely busted. So, and then on top of this, you also have your foci. You're like your normal foci. So theoretically, you're looking at, I have all of my focuses full. So like theoretically where you want to get to is I have all 4 of my focuses at a 1-to-1 ratio full through my Staff of the Magi, okay? Which these are focuses for uppers, which don't exist normally, okay? This is the first time in the rulebook that we're seeing that you get a focus for your uppers, like a battery that you get to store your uppers in. First time we're seeing that, okay? Absolutely bonkers. Just that alone. It's at a 1-to-1 ratio, which is insane. All the other ratios are like kind of bad, okay? It's like 5-to-1 or 4-to-1 or 3-to-1. This is a 1-to-1 ratio, so if I have 25 wizardry left over at the end of my game, I get to store 25 wizardry in my thing. That's fucking bonkers. Holy crap, it's good, okay? Then, okay, getting past this first slide of text, you get it's a staff. It's just a Fizzer up staff, okay? And must be something special. So you have to like go out and like buy. If you're playing an Elder Wyrm, you're pretty much dedicated to the LARP. Okay, so at that point they're expecting you to go out and buy like a super fancy staff looking thing that's like a Gandalf staff, right? Like that's representative of yourself. Okay. Is a base 6 magic weapon, which is like meh, you're a worm. You don't care about having a weapon in your hand so that way you can deflect and stuff is relevant, but base 6 magic weapon, sure. You very rarely. I've seen some worms use these as like actual melee weapons, and it's silly. It's funny to watch. Unshatterable, okay. Immune to disarm, cool. Can be summoned at any time for 10 and 10, cool. Can be stored and or resummoned on a 3 count, retaining all the magic and stuff at an additional cost of 10 and 10. So you can, it's convenient, right? So you don't always have to be carrying it around. If for some reason you don't want to be carrying it, you can store it. It is not possible to use the mana from the staff to resummon itself, which is important to note. No mana is lost, however, it is not possible to use any other abilities of staff while it is stored. Okay, so you're gonna get some stuff's gonna come up, but you don't get to use these skills when you're having the staff stored. Chromatic worms who cast rituals with their Staff of the Magi in the circle and touching them gain a small benefit to casting. Gem worms gain a larger benefit, and metallic worms gain even more benefit. If the worm scales are hidden, it is up to the worm to inform the ritual master. This has some weird. I don't know why it matters, but essentially, when you're an Elder Worm, you get and you have a Staff of the Magi, you're getting a benefit. Period. Um, but also metallic, like if I guess the mist prefers you ritual casting if you're like a specific type of worm. I have no idea. Has to be roleplay, and this is a good question to go figure out why. I have no clue why that's like this, but I'm gonna go walk in the game and try and figure it out because that sounds interesting. Um, if the worm or staff are dispelled, so the downside is that you can dispel this thing technically, which the worm is going to do absolutely everything in their possible ability to make sure that you can't do this. So good luck, right? But if it was lost, then all of your shit is gone, okay? Which is scary, right? So dispelling one of these is nuts. But yeah. Gone and magic stored is lost. If the worm is dispelled / suppressed or resurrects, staff is lost, even if it was stored. Yeah, very important to note. Okay. Choose 2 of the following powers from this list, okay? Must choose 2 separate powers. To imbue your weapon with that will only function for the guy, for you. It only functions for you. Which must be signed by a marshal. You may reselect upon summoning the staff, but not when recalling it. Abilities granted by the staff are not refreshed. So, when you store it and bring it back out, you don't get to change it. It's when you initially summon it, okay? Which means that you can't just trade this out like candy. Like, you have to drop because to unsummon it would mean that you're dropping all of your focus stuff. So you're really dedicating yourself to these 2, okay, for the most part. Like, unless you don't plan on keeping your stuff full in a 1-to-1 focus, which would be nuts. And you want to constantly change. You're picking 2 and you're not really changing it, okay? Like there's unless other okay. All these skills require Staff of the Magi to be in hand to function. Additionally, the Wyrm may change one ability. Oh, okay, cool. So you can literally yeah. Why wouldn't it be amazingly convenient? You get to pay 10 and 10 to change the abilities of the staff. To change one of them. The Wyrm may change both abilities. Oh, sure. Okay. Without losing any of the story. Yeah, why wouldn't it just be convenient? You know? They're Elder Wyrm. Why don't we just make it the easiest thing to do in the world? Uh Yeah. So okay, yeah. Dude, play an Elder Wyrm, bro. Elder Wyrm is nuts. This is by far like one of the strongest things you can like, and I get that gets into like metagaming with like, oh, I want to have the strongest character. Like if you want to play a cool wizard and you want to be the best wizard you can be, like if you want to be as Gandalf as possible, play an Elder Wyrm, okay? Like it is so good to play an Elder Wyrm. We're gonna look through all these. Ritual Stike memorize rituals for 5 avatar and 5 wizardry per ritual. Okay. Transmutation need not be in hand. May summon the staff in the shape of a non-staff melee striking weapon. Can be combined with detonation. Blah blah blah. This weapon cannot be combined with other certain ones. This weapon must have an attached orange ribbon to show it's a construct. So basically, you can turn your useless staff because fighting with a staff is hard. So you can make it a base 6 magic weapon, unshatterable, immune to disarm, in the shape of a sword, which makes it a lot more convenient to fight with. I personally haven't seen that, but I mean that's totally viable if you want to be like a sword swinging Wyrm. Because there's nothing in Wyrm that says you can't wear armor and like be in the front line. We talked about that. Mobility may utilize rain of element rituals that require arm raised with staff of magi in hand instead. May move while the rituals. I mean, you'd have to understand what that ritual does. I don't, but probably okay. Weapon gains a plus 10 unsuppressible magic aura, so it becomes a base 16 magic weapon. So if you wanted to be like a fighting guy still, you could have a base 16 magic unshatterable undisarmable weapon by picking this one and having it in the shape of a sword. That'd be sick. Ritual turning. 3 times ritual reflex per week, which this means per event essentially. Energy dampening. Not be in hand. 3 times for logistics, it may resist raw elements and negative spell effect durations are reduced to 1 minute on the wielder. So if you get feared for 10 minutes, which 10 minutes is the standard time for a negative spell effect, you get it reduced to 1 minute. Sweet. 1 in 1, you get a spell strike through your staff. Cool. Defending 3 physical resists per week. The Wyrm may also block. So a staff, if you go look in the rulebook for like what staff means, it means you have to have 2 hands on it to be using it as like an actual thing. And so this ability gives you 3 physical resists, and then also you only have to have 1 hand on the staff. I'm pretty sure a lot of Wyrms pick this, because I don't see people 2-handing staffs a lot. Yeah. And it's very important to have a staff to block, and you also get to use like lower fighting pools. Casting need not be in hand to function. All rituals you lead cast take half time, and memorizing rituals may be slightly easier. It is the possibilities and responsibility to inform the ritual marshal that they have the casting aspect and the staff their magi. Again, casting stuff. I assume this is useful and relevant. Ooh. This has to do with mist walking because Wyrms can Elder Mist Walk. Bypass 1 domain challenge by brandishing this. You're gonna find out if you ever go on a mist walk. I promise you're gonna find out what a domain challenge is and how cool they are. I did one at my last event. It was sweet. By brandishing the staff of the Magi and saying something to the effect, "You shall let me pass." In addition, the Wyrm counts as a Mistwalker guide for double the number of allies that a Wyrm may normally guide. So there's, like I said when I covered Mistwalking with Nullifidian, there is the Mistwalking is like a 2-sentence skill, but if you wanted to explain Mistwalking to somebody, it could be like about as big as this skill, honestly. Like there's a ton of like nuances to it and like things that are, and it's all in-game stuff. It's not mechanical stuff, because mechanically it's just interact with plot and you go on a mistwalk. Then there are cultural and roleplay dynamics that come into play about like how does mistwalking work, and this interacts with that. Detonation may in 10 10-foot radius, focus cast a spell for twice its rank in both upper pools. Cost must be paid out in the staff, i.e. focus cause fear 10-foot radius. So this allows you to radius cast certain spells by paying double in uppers. So you don't use lowers to cast a spell. You use double the amount of uppers it would take to normally cast a spell, and you get to do it in a 10-foot radius, based off of your staff. As well as any items not in someone's possession if they're legal targets. The casting worm is not the target of the spell. Any targets within 10 may use normal defenses that would defend against the spell with the exception of dodge. Dodge does not interact with radiuses because you cannot dodge a radius. Pretty sick. This is sweet. Need not be in hand. 3 free line of sight shifts, but unlike other uses of shifting, you may not bring passengers in maximum distances roughly 1 mile. So this is line of sight shifting is I think it's in meta magics, but this literally just says 3 free line of sight shifts. So if you're like at a tavern and your cabin is by a tree and it's like across the thing and there's like a whole battle going on in front of between the tavern and your cabin and you want to go to sleep, you can be like line of sight shift, put on a white headband, you're now out of game and you get to just walk to wherever you could see. Like, so you line of sight shifted to that tree, and then as soon as you actually get to that tree, you can take off your white headband and you're back in game. Other ways to shift involve you being able to bring other people with you. This specifically says you may not, and it technically is 1 mile. So if you were at like the top of a hill and you could see for miles around you, you may only like line of sight shift a mile. Mystic armor, if you've read Channeler, they have this as a racial. If this is the one you select, you get 150 points of Mystic armor. Go read Channeler. Go watch the Channeler video if you want an explanation of why Mystic armor is okay and good. Remaining still while counting out entire minute will repair any Mystic armor to full capacity. Invulnerable. Need not be in hand. If the Magi is immune to destruction by any conventional means. Sure. This includes the destruction of the staff if the caster is affected by dispel or... Okay, wow. Yeah, so like the risk of losing all of your shit, yeah, you just pick invulnerable and then you don't have that. Sulfur override stroke be no line side purpose and only the caster willing to do so. Yeah. This power has no effect if the casting worm is crumbled to dust. That's important. The worm may ricochet spells for 2 Avatar and 2 Wizardry, or may morph spells for 3 and 3. Yeah. Pretty good. Morph lets you change stuff for like, so if you get hit with like a fireball, you can turn it into like a repel weapon. The worm and ricocheting is somehow different from absorbing. I don't know how to say it. But yeah, that was Staff of Magi. Like, literally, you could just get, like, it's literally Mistwalk, Staff of Magi. That would be fucking nuts, honestly. It would still be worth it. But then, throw on top of this all the other crap that worms get. And you're looking at an insane skill set. Okay, this is actually nuts. This is peak Shiftedlands rulebook gamering, okay? And one of the longest running characters is an elder worm that like knows frickin' everything, and they have a gazillion rituals in their head, and they're like untouchable. Like that is like peak Shiftedlands character progression is like elder worm, guys. Like you do not underestimate an elder worm. Elder worms are spooky to like everybody but Nullifidians. But yeah, that was Wyrm. Hopefully you like Wyrm. I would play a Wyrm. I have buddies that play Wyrms. Wyrm is really good. Like, if you didn't catch it, Wyrm is insanely good. And so that was the last augment. So we're probably going to go back to scripted section video for like explaining what paths are compared to augments. Because a lot of what I've been talking about so far in the past couple of videos, especially in the racial videos, is why would you go elder, why you wouldn't go elder, right? So what if you see all these augments and you're like, I don't really want to be an augment, I want to be an elder of my race. What do I do to progress my character? Do I just dump it into pools? Well, that's what pathways are for. So pathways are ways to, and there are a bunch more paths than there are augments, but they're not as deep as what an augment is. Uh, and so it's like a unique skill set that you'll be able to get. Uh, right. So that's if you want to be an elder of your race, you go down a path. If you don't care about being an elder of your race, you become an augment essentially. Um, because when you become an augment, you get locked out of being an elder. If you become a path, you get locked out of becoming an augment. But you can still be an elder to have a path. So that's what a lot of people who become an elder of the race do is they'll go down a path, of which there is a gazillion. And so we're going to talk about that real quick in the next video, probably 107, and then we're going to start a series again similar to this where it was like unscripted, and we'll go through all of the advanced paths. But yeah, that was Wyrm. Wyrm was 45 minutes again, one of the longer ones. Thank you for watching. This has been Unofficial Shifted Lands LARP Guide 106? 106 for Wyrm. Thank you for watching.